Two homeless children, Danny and Ellie, were scouring the lonely tracks of Blue Ridge, gathering cans and bottles just to survive another day. When a courageous German shepherd named Ranger emerged from the shadows, his eyes pleading, ears alert, a silent cry for help, they sensed something was terribly wrong. Moments later, they heard the distant howl of an approaching train, its heavy rumble masking another desperate sound. Tied helplessly across the rails was not just a firefighter, it was Blake Hudson, a man whose life now hung by a thread. What happened next wasn't merely an act of bravery, it was the first spark of hope in a town overshadowed by cruelty and corruption. A story of innocence, heroism, and the unexpected family that emerges when courage meets kindness. Before we begin, do you know someone brave enough to stand alongside a loyal dog through danger and darkness? Leave their name in the comments below so we can honor these everyday heroes. And if you believe in the power of courage, compassion, and family, don't forget to subscribe. The story you're about to witness may just remind you, sometimes angels come disguised with paws. The early autumn evening cloaked the town of Blue Ridge in a blanket of golden hues, accentuated by crisp air carrying hints of wood smoke and drying leaves. Nestled among the wooded foothills of northern Georgia, Blue Ridge was a small, close-knit community known for its idyllic charm and peaceful demeanor. But tonight, the tranquility had fractured under the glare of flashing red lights and shrill sirens. Blake Hudson stood tall amidst the chaos. At 37, Blake embodied the image of a seasoned firefighter, broad-shouldered and muscular, standing just shy of 6'3". His dark blonde hair, cropped short beneath his soot-streaked helmet, framed a face marked by strength and determination. Blake's eyes were deep hazel, calm yet resolute, hardened by countless battles against flames that threatened lives and homes. Tonight, as smoke billowed around him, his gaze was laser-focused, assessing each movement with precision. He shouted commands through the crackle of his radio, coordinating the efforts of his firefighting crew as flames roared violently from the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Once a bustling textile mill, the building now stood neglected, forgotten relics of Blue Ridge's industrial past. The fire surged angrily, tongues of orange piercing the deepening twilight sky. Among Blake's trusted crew was Jenna Caldwell, a dedicated firefighter in her late 20s, athletic with sharp blue eyes beneath strands of strawberry blonde hair, usually tied back tightly. Jenna was quiet but fearless, someone Blake relied upon implicitly. Together, they led the team into the heart of the inferno. "Blake!" Jenna called above the roar of flames, pointing toward the structure's rear corner. "Something's off here. The fire's hottest in that corner. Could be chemical storage." "Let's move carefully," Blake acknowledged, signaling caution. The two advanced methodically through the dense smoke, masks amplifying their heavy breathing. As they approached, Blake's intuition pricked at him, a feeling honed by experience, whispering that something else was concealed within these burning walls. It wasn't merely textiles or abandoned industrial equipment fueling the blaze. Something more sinister simmered beneath the surface. At last, reaching the back corner, Jenna stumbled slightly over a metallic handle protruding oddly from the scorched concrete floor. Blake swiftly caught her arm, steadying her, eyes narrowing at the handle. "It's a hatch," Blake murmured through his mask, heart quickening with an uneasy sense of dread. Summoning their strength, Blake and Jenna heaved open the heavy hatch, revealing steep concrete steps descending into darkness. Smoke poured upward, briefly obscuring their vision, but Blake swiftly lowered himself down, flashlight piercing the gloom. Jenna followed closely, tense but unwavering. Below ground, the temperature dropped dramatically, providing slight relief from the scorching heat above. Blake swept the flashlight around a hidden chamber, its pale beam illuminating stacks of metal filing cabinets and crates stamped with strange, coded markings. As Blake opened one cabinet drawer, a slew of files spilled forth, landing at his feet. Picking one up cautiously, he flipped through pages, his stomach nodding instantly. Inside were photographs, grainy and hauntingly candid images of young faces, eyes wide with fear, names and ages scrawled hastily beneath. Other documents detailed shipments, transactions, and locations, their cryptic codes sending chills down Blake's spine. "This is human trafficking," Blake whispered, his voice barely audible even to Jenna beside him. Jenna's eyes, usually steely with composure, widened in horror as she absorbed what lay scattered around them. Further exploration revealed financial ledgers, surveillance photographs, and maps dotted with clandestine routes. A prominent name recurred in multiple documents: Warren Crawford. Blake recognized the name immediately, one of Blue Ridge's wealthiest and most respected businessmen. Warren was the epitome of charm in public, a philanthropist whose polished smile masked immense influence and power. But these documents exposed a grotesque reality behind Crawford's pristine facade. "We need to get these out," Blake insisted, urgency sharpening his voice. Jenna nodded sharply, reaching for a nearby box to gather files. Just as they did, Blake's radio crackled with urgency. "Chief Hudson, roof's unstable, evacuate immediately." "Copy that," Blake replied swiftly, clutching the precious files tight against his chest. He and Jenna hurried upward, coughing heavily as smoke reclaimed the air. Just moments after they emerged into fresh air, the warehouse roof gave way with a deafening roar, flames reaching desperately skyward before collapsing inward. As the team battled the dying embers, Blake stood silently apart, files trembling slightly in his grip. His thoughts raced, torn between disbelief and rage. Warren Crawford had always been untouchable in Blue Ridge, above suspicion. How deep did this corruption reach? Back at the station later that evening, Blake carefully secured the recovered documents in his locker, mind consumed with contemplation. Nearby, curled faithfully at his feet, lay Ranger, his trusted canine partner. Ranger was a magnificent 6-year-old German shepherd, sleek and powerful. His thick coat, a striking blend of rich sable and deep ebony, gleamed softly under the station lights. Intelligent amber eyes watched Blake attentively, sensing his turmoil. Blake leaned down, gently scratching behind Ranger's ears. The dog nuzzled affectionately, tail wagging slowly in reassurance. Ranger had been at Blake's side through countless rescues, trained not just to sniff out flames and danger, but also to comfort the wounded souls left behind. "You feel it too, don't you, buddy?" Blake murmured softly. Ranger's ears perked slightly as if understanding perfectly. "We can't let Crawford get away with this." Blake knew challenging Crawford meant immense risk, threatening not just himself but possibly endangering those around him. But justice burned deeply within him, a fire that rivaled even those he fought externally. That night, the weather shifted abruptly. Wind howled fiercely outside Blake's modest home, rattling window panes and shaking branches. He sat quietly in the dim kitchen, studying documents beneath a single, muted light. His phone buzzed suddenly, startling him. On screen appeared a message from an unknown number. "You're playing with fire, Hudson. Be careful." Heart-pounding, Blake looked toward Ranger, who lay nearby, tense and alert, ears erect. Danger had found its way, closer than expected. Blake realized Crawford's reach extended further than he'd feared, possibly infiltrating even those he trusted. Yet retreat was never an option. Blake's mission had become crystalline. He must expose Warren Crawford, tearing down the facade to rescue innocent lives trapped in shadows. Blue Ridge deserved better, safer streets and peaceful homes untouched by corruption's taint. Resolute, Blake carefully hid the documents beneath loose floorboards near his fireplace, secure for the moment. Tomorrow he would seek counsel from an old friend outside Blue Ridge, someone unconnected and trustworthy. Tonight, however, vigilance became essential. As Blake settled into a restless sleep, Ranger rose silently, padding to the doorway. He gazed outward, watchful, ears twitching slightly at distant sounds only he detected. Instinct told the shepherd darker days loomed ahead, battles fiercer than before, but his loyalty to Blake remained unwavering. Outside, beneath the darkened sky, Blue Ridge slumbered, unaware that beneath its tranquil surface, justice's flame had been ignited, a flame that would either purify or consume, determined solely by the courage of those who wielded it. Blake woke early the following morning to a dull gray sky and the faint scent of impending rain lingering in the crisp air of Blue Ridge. Despite his restless sleep, his resolve remained unshaken. After a quick breakfast, he gathered the concealed files from beneath the floorboards and headed straight to the fire station, Ranger trotting faithfully by his side. Inside the station's break room, Blake found Jake Donovan, a fellow firefighter and one of his closest friends. Jake, in his mid-30s, had the sturdy build of someone accustomed to manual labor, with broad shoulders, sandy brown hair neatly combed, and eyes the clear gray-blue of a winter sky. Known for his easy smile and jovial personality, Jake was beloved at the station, respected for his bravery, and trusted implicitly by Blake after years of shared dangers. Jake glanced up as Blake entered, eyebrows raising slightly when he noticed the tense expression etched on Blake's usually composed face. "Hey, Hudson," Jake greeted casually, setting down his steaming coffee mug. "Rough night?" Blake glanced briefly toward the hallway before closing the door behind him. "You have no idea," he murmured quietly. He placed the thick bundle of files on the table in front of Jake. "Look, Donovan, I stumbled onto something big last night at the warehouse fire." Jake's eyes narrowed curiously. "What do you mean? Is this about Crawford?" Blake hesitated momentarily, studying his friend closely. Jake's honest face betrayed nothing but concern, strengthening Blake's confidence in his choice to trust him. "Yeah, it is. And it's worse than we thought. Human trafficking. Right here in Blue Ridge." Jake paled slightly, flipping through the pages with growing alarm. "Are you sure? Warren Crawford is one of the most influential men in town." "The evidence is right here," Blake asserted firmly. "Crawford's the man behind it, Jake. I need help getting this information to the authorities outside Blue Ridge." Jake nodded slowly, eyes hardening with determination. "You can count on me, Blake. Let's meet tonight away from town and discuss our next steps." Satisfied he'd made the right call, Blake gathered the files and left quickly, not noticing the subtle change in Jake's expression as he turned away, an expression colder, darker, tinged with unease. That evening, Blake drove cautiously through winding, rain-slick roads to the secluded edge of town near the old train depot, Ranger sitting alertly beside him. Heavy clouds had rolled in, unleashing a gentle drizzle that pattered softly against the windshield, mirroring Blake's tension. Pulling into the depot's gravel lot, Blake's headlights illuminated Jake standing silently under the awning, hands deep in his jacket pockets, posture strangely rigid. Blake stepped from his truck, Ranger padding closely behind, ears pricked forward with subtle apprehension. "Jake?" Blake approached slowly. "Everything all right?" But Jake wouldn't meet his gaze, staring instead past Blake's shoulder. Blake felt his stomach tighten with sudden dread. Before he could turn around, a heavy blow landed sharply at the back of his head. Blake stumbled forward, vision blurring, hearing Ranger bark furiously before a second strike plunged him into darkness. When consciousness returned, Blake's skull throbbed fiercely, his body restrained painfully by tight ropes cutting deep into his wrists and ankles. Gagged and unable to move, he felt the chilling touch of cold metal beneath him, the railroad tracks. Terror surged through him as he realized exactly where he lay, exposed and helpless. Above him loomed a man Blake recognized immediately, Eddie Barnes, Crawford's notorious henchman. Barnes was tall and gaunt, with a pale complexion and hollow eyes that conveyed a cruel indifference. His angular face twisted in a mocking smirk as he leaned close, voice dripping venom. "You messed with the wrong man, Hudson. Crawford sends his regards." Nearby, Jake stood awkwardly, visibly shaken but silent. Blake locked eyes with him, silently pleading, but Jake turned away, shame and guilt etched deeply on his features. Without another word, Barnes signaled, and Jake disappeared into the shadows. Blake's heart sank, the betrayal cutting deeper than the physical agony pulsing through his body. Then Barnes leaned closer once more, his tone icy. "Enjoy your last few minutes, hero." As the sound of retreating footsteps faded, Blake struggled vainly against his bindings, adrenaline surging as he heard a distant but unmistakable sound, a train whistle piercing through the night. Meanwhile, Ranger had narrowly escaped capture, darting desperately through the woods, driven by loyalty and fear for his beloved master. Rain now fell harder, soaking Ranger's thick fur as he sprinted toward the faint glow of streetlights ahead, senses alert, guided by instinct alone. Entering the outskirts of town, Ranger's sharp ears caught muffled voices beneath an old bridge, a makeshift shelter occupied by two children. Ranger approached cautiously, head lowered submissively, eyes pleading for help. Danny, the older of the two at 13, was wiry with tousled dark hair, green eyes cautious yet compassionate. He stood protectively in front of Ellie, his younger sister, who at 10 appeared delicate, pale, with unruly blonde curls framing wide, wary eyes. The siblings had lived rough, forced into survival mode, their innocence worn thin by hardship. Danny eyed Ranger warily at first, but Ellie sensed the urgency in the dog's gentle whine. She reached out, fingers brushing the dog's wet fur. "He needs help, Danny. she whispered softly. Danny hesitated briefly, glancing at Ranger's collar bearing the engraved tag. K9 Ranger, property of Blue Ridge Fire Department. Realization dawned instantly. He's a rescue dog. Something's wrong. As Ranger pawed gently, urgently toward the darkness from which he'd emerged, Danny's resolve hardened. All right, boy, show us, he decided, grabbing Ellie's hand tightly as Ranger eagerly led them back toward the tracks. They reached Blake mere moments before the train's roar filled the night air. Panic surged through the children, yet they moved swiftly, Ellie fumbling with Blake's gag while Danny attacked the knots furiously. Ranger barked anxiously, eyes darting between Blake and the rapidly approaching headlights. Finally, Blake's mouth was free. "Run, it's too late," he shouted desperately. "No!" Danny gritted fiercely, fingers raw and bloody. With seconds remaining, the ropes fell loose. Blake rolled from the tracks, grabbing the children protectively as they collapsed together onto muddy gravel. The train thundered past, its deafening whistle slicing through the rain-soaked darkness. Breathing raggedly, Blake clutched Ranger close, gratitude flooding his chest as he gazed at the brave children who'd risked their lives. Despite his physical agony, determination burned brighter within him. Crawford might have allies and spies, but Blake now knew courage and loyalty existed in even the darkest corners of Blue Ridge. As lightning illuminated the frightened yet defiant faces of Danny and Ellie, Blake silently vowed he would not only expose Crawford, but also repay these courageous souls who had just saved his life, whatever the cost. The storm had gradually subsided, leaving behind only the dull echo of raindrops dripping from branches, as Blake, Danny, Ellie, and Ranger made their weary way towards an abandoned shack hidden just beyond the tree line. Blake's injuries throbbed fiercely with every step, but he kept moving, propelled by sheer determination. Beside him, Ranger trotted vigilantly, ears twitching at every subtle noise from the shadowy forest. Danny walked protectively alongside his younger sister, Ellie, his muddy hands trembling slightly. At 13, Danny appeared older than his age suggested. His angular, dirt-streaked face bore the hardened look of someone accustomed to harsh conditions. He had dark, unruly hair perpetually falling over his green eyes that had already witnessed too much for a child his age. Life on the streets had made him suspicious of strangers, yet beneath his wary exterior was a fierce loyalty, especially towards Ellie. Ellie, 10 years old and visibly frail, clutched Ranger's damp fur gently with small, delicate fingers. Her blonde curls were tangled and soaked, framing her pale face. Wide blue eyes filled with uncertainty peeked out from beneath thick lashes, yet they reflected a quiet resilience beyond her years. Though timid around people, Ellie held an instinctive trust toward animals, a trait born from early experiences that left her wary of adults, but drawn to creatures with gentle hearts. Together, this unlikely group finally reached the dilapidated shack, half hidden by vines and shadowed by towering oaks. Blake carefully eased himself onto a weathered bench outside, breathing heavily, pain etching lines deeply across his face. Ranger settled at his feet, alert and watchful. Danny looked cautiously around before joining Ellie next to Blake. "We come here sometimes," he explained quietly, his voice tentative but sincere. "When it gets too cold or rainy under the bridge. Nobody bothers us here." Blake nodded gratefully, managing a weak smile. "You kids were incredibly brave back there. Thank you." Ellie offered a shy smile in return, softly stroking Ranger's ears. "Ranger helped us," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "He's special." Blake reached out gently, his strong hand resting reassuringly on Ellie's thin shoulder. "Yes, he truly is." A brief silence hung in the damp air before Blake spoke again, his tone cautious, yet earnest. "Where are your parents?" Danny tensed visibly, looking away sharply, pain flickering briefly in his eyes. "Gone," he muttered bitterly. "Mom left when Ellie was little. Dad disappeared months ago. Been just us since." Ellie shivered slightly, drawing closer to her brother. Blake felt a pang of sadness for these children, forced to survive alone on the streets of Blue Ridge. At that moment, footsteps crunched through the fallen leaves nearby, and Ranger immediately growled softly, ears alert. Blake stiffened, his body instinctively tensing, readying for trouble. From the shadows emerged an older woman stepping slowly into the moonlight. Her frail figure was wrapped in layers of worn clothing, a thick shawl draped around narrow shoulders. Mary Ellen, as locals called her, was a familiar sight in Blue Ridge. Approaching 70, her lined, weathered face spoke of a life lived in quiet isolation. Long, silver hair fell loosely down her back, and her soft brown eyes held a warmth that contrasted starkly with her rugged appearance. Though often overlooked by townsfolk, Mary Ellen watched everything, a silent guardian of the forgotten and vulnerable. She raised her hand in reassurance, offering a gentle smile. "Easy there, Ranger," she said soothingly. The dog recognized her instantly, tail wagging slightly. Mary Ellen glanced at Blake and the children, understanding dawning in her perceptive gaze. "Trouble tonight?" Blake hesitated briefly, recognizing genuine compassion in her eyes. "Unfortunately, yes," he admitted quietly. "Ran into Warren Crawford's men." Mary Ellen nodded knowingly, her expression darkening. "Dangerous man, that Crawford. Rumors say he controls half the town. What did you uncover?" "Trafficking," Blake said grimly. "I found evidence last night after a fire. Jake Donovan betrayed me. Crawford's men left me for dead." Danny and Ellie listened intently, eyes widening as realization hit them about the gravity of their actions tonight. Mary Ellen sighed deeply. "Then you're in greater danger now than ever. Crawford won't stop until he silences you permanently." Blake met her steady gaze, resolve hardening. "That's why I need to get this evidence safely to the right people." Mary Ellen nodded slowly. "There's someone who might help you. Someone Crawford fears. Her name is Amelia Hunt, an FBI agent. She's been quietly investigating Crawford for months." Blake felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. "Where can I find her?" Mary Ellen reached into her shawl, pulling out a small notebook. She carefully scribbled down an address, handing it to Blake. "It's discreet, on the outskirts. Tell her Mary Ellen sent you." Blake accepted it gratefully. "Thank you." Danny shifted uncomfortably, eyes fixed on the ground. "What about us? If Crawford finds out we helped—" "He won't," Blake assured firmly, "but I won't leave you behind either. You'll stay here with Mary Ellen until I return." Ellie's grip on Ranger tightened anxiously. "Promise you'll come back?" Blake smiled warmly, placing a gentle hand on her head. "I promise, Ellie. Ranger and I will return." With a last reassuring glance, Blake stood carefully, grimacing slightly as pain radiated through his battered body. He whistled softly, and Ranger immediately stood ready, poised by his side. Mary Ellen placed comforting arms around the two children, holding them protectively as Blake and Ranger moved quietly into the shadows, disappearing from view. The shack grew silent, filled only with the quiet breathing of Danny, Ellie, and Mary Ellen. After a long pause, Danny finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he'll make it?" Mary Ellen's expression softened reassuringly. "He's stronger than most, and Ranger won't leave his side." Outside, beneath the slowly clearing night sky, Blake pressed onward, heart filled with determination despite the danger ahead. Ranger remained faithfully at his side, alert and protective. Meanwhile, across town, Warren Crawford paced furiously in his lavish study. Crawford, in his mid-50s, exuded authority, impeccably dressed even at this late hour. Tall and powerfully built, his iron-gray hair was meticulously groomed, complementing a face coldly handsome yet devoid of warmth. His eyes, steel-gray and calculating, flashed angrily as Eddie Barnes delivered disappointing news. "He survived?" Crawford snarled. "And the evidence?" Barnes hesitated nervously. "He still has it. We couldn't retrieve anything." Crawford slammed his fist angrily onto his mahogany desk, fury simmering dangerously. "Hudson will ruin everything if he's not stopped. Find him and finish the job immediately." Barnes nodded sharply and exited quickly, leaving Crawford brooding darkly in silence, rage building ominously within him. Back at the shack, unaware of the storm brewing, Danny and Ellie huddled close to Mary Ellen, finding solace in her steady presence. But they knew tonight had changed everything. Their fates now intertwined irrevocably with Blake Hudson, the courageous firefighter who had unexpectedly become their hero, and whose battle against Warren Crawford had only just begun. The soft glow of dawn crept over Blue Ridge, painting the small town in muted shades of amber and rose, as Blake, accompanied by Ranger and the two brave children, Danny and Ellie, trudged wearily down the quiet main street. Blake's breathing was shallow, every step agonizingly painful, but his spirit surged with gratitude at the realization that he had narrowly escaped death, thanks solely to these courageous children and Ranger's unwavering loyalty. Danny walked close beside Blake, glancing anxiously upward, his eyes filled with concern. Ellie clung gently to Ranger's thick fur, her tiny frame shivering from exhaustion and lingering fear. Blake paused briefly, steadying himself against a lamppost, and gazed at the children thoughtfully. He knew deep down that confronting Warren Crawford alone would be a futile, dangerous endeavor. He needed allies, trustworthy friends who could help shield Danny and Ellie from Crawford's wrath. "Come with me," Blake said gently, mustering a reassuring smile. "There's someone who can help." They moved slowly toward the heart of town, stopping before a small, welcoming storefront nestled between a modest flower shop and the local diner. Above the faded green door hung a weathered wooden sign, May's General Store. May Thompson, the proprietor, was an elderly woman whose kindness and generosity were legendary throughout Blue Ridge. At 72, May stood barely over 5 feet tall, her thin figure wrapped snugly in an oversized floral apron. Her silver-gray hair was neatly tied back into a bun, revealing a face softly creased by age and perpetual warmth. Bright, observant eyes sparkled behind round spectacles, and May always greeted customers with a smile and words of genuine kindness. The loss of her husband years prior had deeply affected her, but May had turned her grief into a quiet mission caring for anyone in need, particularly those overlooked by society. When the shop door jingled softly, May glanced up, her welcoming smile quickly fading into deep concern upon seeing Blake's battered condition and the 2 weary children. "Good heavens! Blake Hudson, what happened to you?" she exclaimed, moving swiftly to assist him. "It's complicated, May," Blake said weakly, his voice strained, "but we need help." May guided Blake carefully toward a sturdy wooden chair, her gentle hands trembling slightly as she helped him sit. She turned quickly to Danny and Ellie, immediately recognizing their street-worn appearance. "You poor darlings," she murmured compassionately, beckoning them closer. "Let's get you something warm." As May busied herself brewing hot cocoa behind the counter, Blake briefly explained the night's harrowing events: Warren Crawford's treachery, Jake Donovan's betrayal, and the horrifying experience at the railroad tracks. May's face paled as she listened carefully, nodding gravely. "I've always known Crawford was dangerous, but this is monstrous," she whispered softly. Her gaze lingered tenderly upon Danny and Ellie, determination shining brightly in her eyes. "You're safe here, children," May assured firmly, placing steaming mugs of cocoa before them. "This town's darkness won't touch you within these walls." Danny stared into his mug, struggling to contain the emotion welling within him. Ellie cautiously sipped her cocoa, savoring the warmth spreading comfortingly through her small frame. Suddenly, the shop's bell jingled again, drawing everyone's attention toward the door. Blake tensed instinctively, but relaxed upon recognizing Sheriff Tom Harding, a longtime friend and trusted law enforcement officer in Blue Ridge. Tom, in his early 50s, possessed a reassuring presence, tall and sturdy with broad shoulders and short-cropped hair, mostly gray with hints of his original brown color. His rugged face bore the weathered look of someone who had faced countless challenges, yet remained grounded by integrity and fairness. Calm brown eyes surveyed the room carefully, instantly noting Blake's condition and the children's frightened appearances. "Blake?" Tom asked, voice concerned yet cautious. "I got a call about trouble. Warren Crawford's men have been all over town tonight. Care to explain?" Blake exchanged a quick glance with May, deciding swiftly that Tom could be trusted completely. Quietly and succinctly, Blake recounted his discovery at the warehouse, Jake's betrayal, and his subsequent near-death experience. Tom's jaw clenched tightly, anger briefly flashing in his eyes. "Damn, Crawford's gone too far this time," he growled, frustration evident. "But Crawford controls half the force. My hands are tied." Blake sighed wearily, recognizing the truth in Tom's words. "Then we'll need outside help," Blake stated resolutely. Mary Ellen suggested contacting an FBI agent named Amelia Hunt. Sheriff Harding nodded thoughtfully, clearly approving of this plan. "She's a good choice, Blake. I've heard rumors she's already investigating Crawford secretly." May moved quietly around the counter, placing a reassuring hand gently on Blake's shoulder. "You can trust Tom, Blake. He'll watch over us while you get to Amelia." Danny glanced up sharply, suddenly alarmed. "You're leaving?" Blake met the boy's worried gaze, gently reassuring. "Just briefly. Ranger and I must get help to end Crawford's corruption permanently. But I promise, I'll return for you both." Ellie's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely, clinging tightly to May's reassuring hand. Ranger nuzzled gently against Ellie's leg, silently comforting the frightened child. As morning sunlight filled the shop, Blake slowly stood, body protesting fiercely. May wrapped a thick coat gently around his shoulders. "Be careful," she murmured softly, eyes filled with concern. Tom moved toward the door, pausing briefly beside Blake. "I'll keep watch here until you're safe. Crawford won't touch them." With gratitude flooding his heart, Blake nodded appreciatively before stepping carefully onto the street, Ranger closely at his side. As they moved determinedly toward Amelia Hunt's secret meeting place, Blake silently vowed he would see justice delivered and protect those who had bravely stood beside him. Back inside May's store, Danny sat silently sipping cocoa, worry etched deeply on his young face. Ellie curled protectively against May's side, already trusting her kindness implicitly. Noticing Danny's distress, May knelt gently before him, tenderly cupping his face with a soft, comforting touch. "Danny, you and Ellie are not alone anymore," she promised sincerely, eyes warm and determined. "We will protect you. Blake's heart is strong, and he'll return safe." Danny looked into May's compassionate gaze, feeling a rare flicker of hope ignite within his battered spirit. Perhaps, he thought cautiously, life would finally offer them a chance at peace. A family beyond blood, bound instead by bravery, loyalty, and genuine care. Outside, Blake continued onward through Blue Ridge's awakening streets, Ranger faithfully beside him. Each painful step only deepened his resolve, fueled by memories of Danny and Ellie's courage, May's steadfast kindness, and Tom's unwavering integrity. Crawford's power might loom ominously over Blue Ridge, but Blake understood clearly now. In unity lay strength enough to confront even the darkest evil, and he was determined to rally that strength for justice's sake. A heavy mist blanketed Blue Ridge in silvery silence as Blake cautiously approached the secluded cabin nestled on the outskirts of town, Ranger trotting silently at his side. Dawn was still a whisper on the horizon, and every step sent pulses of pain through Blake's battered body. He had managed a brief rest after leaving May's store, but his injuries still ached deeply, reminding him constantly of the price of confronting Warren Crawford's treachery. Despite exhaustion, Blake felt a renewed clarity, driven by the knowledge he now had reliable allies to rely on. The cabin stood partially hidden beneath dense oaks, its worn wooden siding cloaked in ivy. Blake knocked lightly, heart quickening when the door opened slowly. Standing before him was Amelia Hunt, the FBI agent Mary Ellen had described. Amelia appeared to be in her early 30s with sharp, intelligent features framed by shoulder-length chestnut hair tied neatly behind her head. Her deep green eyes assessed Blake swiftly but without hostility, radiating an air of quiet confidence and determination. Dressed practically in dark jeans and a charcoal gray jacket, Amelia possessed the lean, athletic build of someone accustomed to field work. Her calm presence immediately put Blake at ease. "You must be Blake Hudson," Amelia greeted softly, stepping aside to invite him in. Her voice held a firm authority tempered by kindness. Blake nodded gratefully, relieved to finally meet the woman who could help him end Crawford's reign of terror. "Thank you for meeting me, Agent Hunt." Amelia closed the door firmly, glancing carefully through the window before turning toward him. "Call me Amelia. We have a lot to discuss." As Blake settled into a worn armchair, Ranger curled protectively at his feet. Amelia retrieved a laptop and several folders, placing them carefully onto the coffee table between them. "I've been tracking Warren Crawford for months," she explained quietly, her expression grave. "We suspected corruption in the local police force but didn't have solid proof until recently." Blake's fists clenched tightly in frustration. "Crawford's got the town sewn up tight. Even Sheriff Harding, though honest, can't risk exposing his hand openly yet." Amelia nodded knowingly, tapping the folders lightly. "This is exactly why I've kept my investigation secret. Crawford's reach is vast, politicians, businessmen, even a few federal agents compromised. It's essential we act cautiously." Blake carefully recounted his horrifying discovery beneath the warehouse, Jake's betrayal, and his narrow escape from death, watching Amelia's reaction closely. Her expression darkened steadily as she absorbed every detail. "You've risked your life enough, Blake," Amelia finally said solemnly, determination filling her voice. "But this evidence you recovered changes everything. It confirms Crawford's involvement directly. Blake leaned forward urgently, pain briefly forgotten. Then let's expose him. Let's bring justice to those he's harmed. Amelia smiled faintly, admiring his courage. We will. But first, we must secure all evidence safely. Crawford's desperate now, he'll do anything to silence us. Across town, beneath the pale morning sky, Danny and Ellie explored the quiet stretch of railroad tracks near May's store. Despite Blake's assurances of safety, Danny remained uneasy, his wary gaze scanning the shadows frequently. Ellie trailed closely behind him, bending occasionally to collect bottles and cans in a small canvas bag May had provided. Her eyes widened suddenly, attention drawn to something partially concealed beneath weeds beside the rails. "Danny, come quick," Ellie exclaimed softly, crouching beside an old metal box, rusted with age. Danny hurriedly joined her, carefully pulling the heavy box free from its hiding place. He pried the stiff hinges open, revealing faded documents, worn photographs, and neatly labeled notebooks. Danny's hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the contents, eyes widening with growing horror. Each page contained haunting details, names, ages, dates, records meticulously documenting missing persons, many children their own age. Ellie clutched Danny's arm tightly, voice barely audible. "Danny, look at the initials. W.C. It must be Warren Crawford." Danny's jaw tightened angrily, recognizing several photographs of children he'd known from living rough around town. "This proves Blake's right," he whispered fiercely. "We have to show this to May." Back at the cabin, Blake and Amelia finalized their plan. Blake stood slowly, gritting his teeth against lingering agony. "I'll get back to Danny and Ellie. May's protecting them, but Crawford won't stop searching." Amelia nodded firmly. "Keep them safe. Tomorrow we'll move forward carefully and swiftly." Returning to May's store just before noon, Blake was immediately greeted by Danny and Ellie's excited, urgent voices, both speaking simultaneously. He knelt slowly, calming them gently. "Slow down. What happened?" Danny thrust the metal box into Blake's hands. "We found this near the tracks. You need to see it." Blake quickly examined the contents, heart heavy with sadness and fury as he recognized the familiar initials, W.C., scrawled across multiple pages. May approached quietly, concern filling her soft, aged features. "What did you find, Blake?" "The final proof," Blake replied solemnly. "This connects Crawford directly to these missing people." Suddenly, Sheriff Harding entered hurriedly, expression grim. "Blake, Crawford's men are patrolling everywhere. They're searching house by house." Blake's heart sank, realizing time had run out. He handed Tom the box quickly. "Get this evidence to Amelia Hunt. She's waiting at the old cabin outside town." Tom nodded swiftly, gripping the box tightly. "Consider it done." Blake turned urgently toward May. "Take Danny and Ellie to the storage cellar. Keep them hidden until it's safe." May embraced the frightened children protectively. "Stay safe, Blake." Blake crouched briefly, placing gentle hands reassuringly upon the children's shoulders. "Trust May. Ranger and I will handle this. We'll be back for you soon." Danny nodded bravely, gripping Ellie's hand tightly as May guided them quickly toward the concealed cellar entrance. Outside, Blake moved cautiously into the street, Ranger close at his side, senses alert. As predicted, several men approached, led by Eddie Barnes. Eddie sneered coldly, voice taunting. "End of the line, Hudson." Blake stared defiantly, standing strong despite intense pain. "Justice always finds the truth, Eddie." Barnes laughed harshly, signaling his men forward. But before they reached Blake, several dark SUVs suddenly surrounded them, doors opening rapidly. FBI agents swiftly exited vehicles, weapons drawn, Amelia Hunt leading confidently. "Federal agents, everyone freeze," Amelia commanded sharply. Barnes and his men complied hesitantly, disarmed swiftly by the FBI team. Amelia approached Blake, relief evident in her eyes. "We received Sheriff Harding's message in time. We've got them, Blake." Blake exhaled deeply, immense gratitude filling him. "Thank you, Amelia." Amelia smiled warmly. "Thank Danny, Ellie, May, and Ranger. You have a remarkable team behind you." Blake nodded quietly, pride swelling within him. Crawford's darkness was finally being pierced by hope and justice, a light Blake vowed to protect fiercely. Nightfall draped the small town of Blue Ridge in shadow, an eerie silence permeating the streets as Blake Hudson and Amelia Hunt prepared to confront Warren Crawford directly. Blake's wound still pulsed with a dull ache, yet adrenaline and determination dulled his pain, sharpening his resolve. Beside him stood Amelia, composed and focused, her chestnut hair pulled back tightly, eyes steady with unwavering courage. Together, they crouched within sight of Crawford's grand estate, a sprawling mansion atop a wooded hill overlooking Blue Ridge. The house, a symbol of Crawford's vast wealth and power, was brightly lit, its windows casting a deceptive glow of warmth against the darkened sky. Ranger, vigilant and poised, remained close at Blake's side, his keen amber eyes scanning the darkness with instinctive caution. "We'll enter from the east gate," Amelia whispered decisively, tracing a route on the small tactical map illuminated faintly by moonlight. "The guards rotate every 15 minutes. If we time this carefully, we should slip in unnoticed." Blake nodded, heart thudding heavily against his chest, understanding the immense danger awaiting them inside. "We only get one shot at this, Amelia. If Crawford's alerted, we'll never get another chance." She met his eyes briefly, confident yet compassionate. "We won't fail. Too many innocent lives depend on this." As the guards rotated away, Blake, Amelia, and Ranger silently advanced toward the mansion. Blake's pulse quickened as they bypassed security cameras Amelia had expertly disabled moments earlier. Approaching a concealed service entrance, they entered cautiously, stepping softly onto polished marble floors, alert for the slightest sound. The interior of Crawford's mansion was lavish yet cold, the opulent surroundings doing little to mask the corruption lurking beneath. They crept along ornate hallways, carefully avoiding detection until reaching Crawford's private office, a massive oak door standing intimidatingly before them. Amelia retrieved her lock-picking tools swiftly, working diligently until the lock clicked softly open. Inside, the office was a meticulous reflection of Crawford himself, luxurious yet rigidly organized, filled with expensive artifacts and framed awards flaunting his supposed philanthropy. Amelia immediately approached Crawford's personal computer, deftly inserting a USB drive to extract critical data. Blake stood guard near the doorway, Ranger tensed beside him, ears pricked forward. Suddenly, bright lights flooded the room, temporarily blinding Blake and Amelia. Crawford's chilling laughter echoed through hidden speakers. Blake felt his blood run cold. They had walked directly into a trap. "You underestimated me, Hudson," Crawford's voice taunted smoothly. Warren Crawford stepped confidently into view, impeccably dressed as always, a triumphant sneer curling his thin lips. Behind him stood Eddie Barnes, his hollow eyes glittering maliciously. "Drop your weapons, Agent Hunt," Crawford commanded coldly. Amelia reluctantly complied, glaring defiantly at their captor. "Your idealism is touching, truly," Crawford continued mockingly, his piercing gaze focused squarely upon Blake. "But sadly, you've accomplished nothing. The evidence dies with you." Blake glared back fiercely, unwavering despite fear clawing at his chest. Ranger growled softly, teeth bared protectively. At that precise moment, commotion erupted outside the mansion, voices raised in confusion and alarm. Crawford's smug expression faltered briefly as a guard burst urgently into the room. "Sir, intruders at the gates, the FBI—" His sentence cut short as Amelia lunged forward, striking swiftly to incapacitate Barnes. Chaos filled the room instantly. Blake tackled Crawford forcefully, grappling desperately for control. But Crawford, surprisingly strong for his age, fought viciously, hands closing tightly around Blake's throat. Vision blurring, Blake fought valiantly, muscles screaming in protest. Ranger leaped forward, jaws clamping down on Crawford's arm, forcing him to release Blake, who collapsed gasping onto the floor. Amelia quickly restrained Barnes as FBI agents poured into the office, weapons raised, commanding everyone down. Sheriff Tom Harding stepped forward alongside the agents, nodding reassuringly toward Blake. "It's over, Crawford. We have everything we need." Blake, still recovering his breath, turned in astonishment as Danny and Ellie entered shyly behind Tom, clutching the metal box discovered by the railroad tracks. Their faces pale yet resolute, eyes locked bravely onto Crawford's furious gaze. "You see this?" Danny's voice trembled slightly but remained firm, holding up the box filled with damning documents. "This proves everything you've done." Crawford's confidence shattered instantly, his expression shifting swiftly from anger to desperation. "You insolent brats," he hissed venomously. Ellie stepped forward defiantly, courage shining brightly within her fragile frame. "We're not scared of you anymore. People like Blake taught us real strength comes from protecting others." Amelia moved protectively beside the children, gently guiding them back. "Your empire's fallen, Warren. You'll face justice now." Handcuffed and subdued, Crawford was led away, hatred blazing intensely in his cold eyes as Blake stood shakily, supported gently by Tom and Amelia. Danny and Ellie rushed to Blake, hugging him tightly, emotions overflowing. "You kids saved us," Blake whispered gratefully, holding them close. Ranger nudged affectionately against them all, tail wagging softly in quiet celebration. Days later, after careful recovery and extensive investigation, Blue Ridge slowly returned to peacefulness, scars healing gradually beneath warm sunlight. Blake, Amelia, Tom, and May gathered in the quiet comfort of May's general store, sharing relieved smiles, discussing brighter futures for their beloved town. Sheriff Harding raised his coffee mug respectfully toward Blake. "Blue Ridge owes you, Blake. You risked everything for justice." Blake shook his head gently, eyes filled with gratitude. "No. We did it together, all of us." May smiled warmly, placing tender arms protectively around Danny and Ellie. "And we gained something precious, a real family." Danny glanced up hopefully at Blake, his voice hesitant yet yearning. "Does this mean we can stay?" Blake knelt slowly, heart swelling with deep affection. "Danny, Ellie, I'd be honored if you'd let me become your family officially. You and Ranger." Ellie threw her small arms joyfully around Blake's neck, tears streaming gently down her smiling face. Danny, shy but relieved, nodded enthusiastically. Ranger barked happily, sensing the joyous atmosphere. That evening, beneath a canopy of brilliant stars twinkling serenely above Blue Ridge, Blake, Danny, Ellie, and Ranger returned home together, a family newly forged through bravery, compassion, and justice. In their newfound unity, Blue Ridge saw darkness replaced by light, despair transformed into lasting hope, forever healing wounds left by Warren Crawford's shadow. In the darkest moments, when all hope seems lost, courage and compassion can illuminate the path to justice and healing. Blake, Danny, Ellie, and Ranger remind us that family isn't always defined by blood, but by loyalty, love, and the strength to stand up for what's right. Just like Blake stood firm against evil, we too can make a difference by protecting and caring for those who need us most. Let this story inspire you to spread kindness in your everyday life. Reach out, lend a hand, and never underestimate your power to change lives. If you were touched by this journey, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that inspire. May God bless each and every one of you watching today. If you believe in the power of faith, courage, and compassion, please leave a comment below saying, Amen.